The ceramic tile shattered against marble, white fragments scattering like fallen stars, and Nyasha Mitchell's universe fractured with it. 3 lines. Bold. Undeniable. Impossible. Her fingertips traced the bathroom counter's edge in Tae-Hyun Kang's penthouse sanctuary, those towering glass walls behind her mirroring Gangnam's luminous sprawl like 1,000 silent witnesses. Her reflection captured it all. Bronze skin gleaming, coiled hair cascading wild across her shoulders, eyes holding that dangerous space between terror and revelation. This wasn't supposed to happen. They'd been meticulous. Obsessively meticulous. Ne sarang. His voice penetrated the door, smooth as aged bourbon. That possessive Korean endearment wrapping around her existence like a brand. Open the door. Her lungs refused to cooperate, her ribcage constricting like invisible bands, were tightening, crushing, suffocating. I'm not asking again. The command beneath those words, that tone that sent Seoul's underground kingpins scattering like startled prey. Nyasha forced movement into her frozen limbs, twisted the handle, and found Tae-Hyun lounging against the frame. His jacket abandoned, that crisp white shirt unbuttoned dangerously low, exposing the obsidian ink climbing from his collarbone. A phoenix mid-ascension, wings spreading across powerful shoulders, flames vanishing beneath expensive cotton. At 6'3", he dwarfed her 5'7" frame, pure controlled violence wrapped in designer clothing. But his face stopped her heart completely. No shock registered there, no surprise coloured his features, only bone-deep satisfaction. You already knew. The accusations scraped from her throat like shattered glass. Dear God, you knew this whole time. Tae-Hyun's midnight eyes tracked across her features with predatory precision that raised every hair on her body, dread mixing with something she violently refused to acknowledge. Naturally, I knew. We used protection religiously for 4 months straight. Her voice splintered. What exactly did you do? He separated from the doorframe with that lethal grace that once felt protective. Now it screamed danger. I eliminated them 6 weeks ago. Reality tilted sideways. Nyasha's hand shot out, gripping the doorframe to prevent collapse, her heart attempting to escape through her chest. You sabotaged the condoms? I stopped purchasing them entirely. Delivered like discussing restaurant reservations, not confessing to demolishing her entire existence. You remained oblivious because when I had you beneath me crying my name, when your breathing turned desperate and broken, you weren't contemplating protection. You were drowning in how I made your body sing. If you want to discover whether Nyasha breaks free from Tae-Hyun obsession or surrenders completely, subscribe now so you don't miss what comes next. Trust me, this story descends into beautiful darkness. Fire flooded her cheeks, humiliation and fury, and the treacherous memory of his hands claiming her skin, his mouth blazing trails down her throat while he whispered filthy promises in Korean she pretended to ignore. But you understood every syllable, didn't you? That internal voice whispered. You knew precisely what he meant when he called you, nay, mine. You impregnated me deliberately. Barely a whisper. Absolutely. The casual confirmation struck like a physical assault. Nyasha's palm flew upward instinctively, targeting his face. Tae-Hyun intercepted her wrist mid-flight, his grip unyielding iron wrapped in silk, firm enough to halt momentum, careful enough to leave no marks. Release me. She yanked against his hold, but he drew her closer instead until his cologne invaded her senses, bergamot and cedar, until his body heat radiated against hers like a living furnace. Arnie. No. His free hand cupped her jaw, angling her face upward to meet his intensity. I'm never releasing you, Ne Sarang. That's precisely the point. You're completely insane. She shoved his chest uselessly, pushing against solid muscle and ink and absolute obsession. I've imprisoned us both. Something raw flickered beneath that arrogant certainty. Do you comprehend what happens when the Baeko syndicate's leader reveals a vulnerability? When whispers spread that Tae-Hyun Kang possesses feelings for an American woman, for an unborn child? The words landed like ice water. Syndicate. What are you? They'll hunt you. His thumb traced her jawline, and despite the fury coursing through her veins, her traitorous body melted into his touch. My adversaries, my competitors, everyone craving my blood, they'll come. You and our child became my greatest weakness, my perfect target. Nyasha's mind spun violently. 4 months. She'd spent 4 months falling for a complete stranger. Then why? Why endanger us if it paints targets on our backs? Because you were planning to leave. His voice dropped into something dangerous, possessive. Your consulting contract expires in 2 months. You were returning to DC, resuming your safe existence, and I would become a story you'd share. That intense Korean man I dated abroad. His jaw clenched. I couldn't. I refused to allow that. So baby trapping was your genius solution? That's your answer? You believe I had alternatives? He laughed. No humor existed in that sound, only darkness and desperation. You entered that Four Seasons gala wearing that scarlet dress, and you looked at me, truly saw me, like I was human, not a monster, like I deserved salvation. His forehead descended to rest against hers, his breath ghosting across her lips. Do you understand how many people regard me with terror, calculation, avarice? But you smiled. You debated with me about Texas brisket versus Korean galbi. You fell asleep on my sofa watching K-dramas, teasing my terrible English pronunciation. You made me feel alive. Stop it. She turned away, but he pursued, his lips brushing her temple. I attempted to release you, he murmured against her skin. For 3 weeks after realizing I was falling, I tried. I convinced myself I'd end this cleanly. Then you'd arrive at my door with tteokbokki from that vendor you adore, speaking mangled Korean to make me laugh, and I'd think, maybe I could preserve one beautiful thing. Nyasha's eyes burned with unshed tears. By stealing my choice? By forcing my hand? Yes. Zero hesitation, zero remorse. His hand slid to her nape, fingers tangling in her curls with possessive authority that triggered involuntary shivers. I'm not virtuous, Nae-sarang. I've extinguished lives. I've committed acts that would sicken you. But I'm yours now, and you're mine. And now there's a life we created together, binding us permanently. What if I disappear? Tae-Hyun's smile could draw blood, his eyes dropping to her mouth. Then I'll locate you. I'll reduce every city between here and DC to ash if necessary. You can despise me, battle me, make me bleed, but you're not leaving. His thumb traced her bottom lip, and she felt her resolve fracturing like ice under pressure. Not now, not ever. And God forgave her, but the certainty in his voice, the dark vow wrapped in obsession, the way his body pressed against hers like he was attempting to brand her with his heat, it terrified her almost as much as it exhilarated her. But what Nyasha didn't know yet, standing in that penthouse with a killer's hands cradling her face like she was something sacred, was that Tae-Hyun wasn't the only one concealing truths. Her consulting position, her background, even her arrival in Seoul, none of it was genuine. And when the truth emerged about who'd actually sent her into Tae-Hyun Kang's orbit, this pregnancy would be the least catastrophic of their problems. Nyasha didn't sleep that night. She lay in Tae-Hyun's king-sized bed, his arm draped possessively across her waist, even unconsciously, staring at the ceiling while her thoughts raced endlessly. 11 weeks pregnant, possibly 12. Her palm drifted to her still flat stomach, reality crashing over her in relentless waves. A child with a man who'd stolen her autonomy, trapped her intentionally, and apparently commanded some criminal empire. Syndicate. The word echoed endlessly. Baeko Syndicate. When dawn broke over Seoul, painting the Han River in coral and gold through those floor-to-ceiling windows, she understood one absolute truth. She had to escape. Not immediately. He'd be monitoring too carefully. But soon. She needed strategy. Tae-Hyun stirred beside her, his grip tightening reflexively before his eyes opened. For one moment he simply observed her, midnight eyes tracking across her face with intensity that prickled her skin, searching for rebellion's telltale signs. "Jal, did you rest well?" His voice carried sleep's roughness, his free hand brushing a curl from her face with surprising tenderness. His duality would drive her insane. "Not particularly," she admitted. Lying seemed futile now. Something flickered in his expression. Perhaps regret, perhaps satisfaction that she was struggling. First trimester difficulties, hormones, anxiety. His palm flattened against her stomach over her silk sleep shirt, stealing her breath despite everything. "We're seeing a doctor today. Private clinic in Cheongdam-dong, the finest available. I need..." His thumb traced circles on her skin, the casual intimacy making her want to simultaneously scream and surrender. "I need confirmation that you're both healthy, non-negotiable." She wanted to resist, but truthfully she needed medical confirmation too. Needed to know if this pregnancy was even viable after all the wine she'd consumed unknowingly, all the late nights and stress. "All right," she conceded, hating how small her voice sounded. "But I refuse to remain imprisoned in this penthouse." Tae-Hyun's smile turned dangerously slow. Who mentioned imprisonment? He sat upward, the sheet falling to his waist, revealing all that ink and muscle in morning light. The phoenix seemed to move across his chest with each breath. "You're not my captive. You're free to go anywhere." "Really?" "Absolutely." He leaned down, his lips brushing her temple. "Provided Tae-Min and Sung accompany you." "Who? My security? Protection?" He pulled back to meet her eyes. "I explained last night. Having this child, makes you vulnerable. I have enemies, namely Sarang. People who'd celebrate hurting me by destroying you." Ice shot down her spine. What kind of enemies? The kind who don't hesitate before pulling triggers. His hand cupped her jaw, tilting her face upward. "So, yes. Shop in Myeongdong. Get coffee in Itaewon. Visit museums. Whatever you desire. But Tae-Min and Sung remain within 10 feet constantly. Not captivity, just constant armed surveillance. So much better." But looking into his eyes, Nyasha saw something that stuttered her pulse, genuine terror. He was frightened for her, terrified beneath all that arrogant control. And that realization changed something she wasn't ready to name. "Get dressed," he said, standing and moving toward his closet. "We'll have breakfast at that place you love in Samcheong-dong, the one with honey butter toast." Despite everything, her traitorous heart warmed. He'd remembered. 4 weeks ago, she'd dragged him to a tiny cafe hidden in Seoul's traditional Hanok village, and he'd watched her devour honey butter toast with strawberries while complaining about excessive sweetness. "You despise that place," she said. "You said it was too... what was the word? Gwiopta." "Adorable." His accent wrapped around the English word as he emerged from the closet in dark jeans and a white button-down, rolling sleeves to reveal more ink crawling down his forearms. "Too adorable for someone like me." He caught her staring at the tattoos and his lips quirked. "But you loved it. And you need something gentle for your stomach." Nyasha's throat constricted. How was she supposed to reconcile this, the thoughtful gesture, the consideration, with the man who deliberately impregnated her to prevent her escape? She slipped from bed and moved to the bathroom, needing space to think. As she brushed her teeth, she studied her reflection. Same face, same body. But everything had transformed overnight. There was a life inside her now, half her, half him. The thought made her dizzy. When she emerged wearing a yellow sundress, Tae-Hyun was leaning against the dresser, scrolling through his phone. He looked up and something heated flashed in his eyes as they travelled down her body. "Arium Dawo," he murmured. "Beautiful." "Stop." She grabbed her purse. "You don't get to look at me like that after what you've done." He crossed the room in 2 strides, catching her wrist gently. Look at you like what? Like I'm the most exquisite thing you've ever witnessed. His other hand slid around her waist, pulling her flush against him. I can't stop, Nae-sarang. I tried. I failed. And now you're carrying my child, and every instinct screams at me to keep you close. His forehead descended to rest against hers, and she could feel his breath ghosting across her lips, warm and dangerously close. I know I'm despicable. I know I stole your choice, but I can't regret it when the alternative was losing you. Nyasha's hands rose to press against his chest, intending to push away, but her traitorous fingers curled into his shirt instead, holding on. You're going to make me hate myself, she whispered, for not hating you enough. His laugh was low and rough. Then we'll hate ourselves together. He kissed her forehead, then her cheek, then the corner of her mouth, soft brushes that made her entire body ache. Come on, let's feed you before I do something that makes us both late. The drive to Samcheong-dong should have been peaceful. Seoul's morning traffic was manageable and the traditional neighborhood was stunning this time of year, autumn leaves painting narrow streets gold and crimson. But Nyasha couldn't shake the feeling that something was catastrophically wrong. Tae-Hyun sat beside her in the back of his black Mercedes, his hand possessively on her thigh, while 2 men she'd never seen before occupied the front seats. Taemin and Sung, both built like concrete walls, both with telltale bulges under their jackets. Relax, Tae-Hyun murmured, his thumb drawing circles on her leg through thin fabric. You're safe. But safety was relative when your boyfriend apparently commanded a criminal empire. The cafe was exactly as she remembered, tucked between traditional hanok houses with wooden beams and paper lanterns, the smell of fresh bread wafting through open windows. Tae-Hyun guided her inside with his hand on her lower back, and the elderly owner, Mrs. Lee, greeted them with warm recognition. Nyasha-si, and your handsome gentleman. The usual, yes please, Nyasha managed, attempting a normal smile. As Mrs. Lee bustled away, Tae-Hyun reached across the table to take her hand, his fingers lacing through hers, warm and possessive. See? Normal. We can achieve something normal. Could they, though? Could they sit here pretending they were just a couple in love, expecting a baby, planning a future? The honey butter toast arrived, golden and perfect with fresh strawberries and whipped cream. Nyasha's stomach growled despite her anxiety, and she took a bite, savouring the sweetness. Tae-Hyun watched her with an indecipherable expression, possessive and soft and dangerous simultaneously. His thumb stroked over her knuckles. Better? It's just toast, Tae-Hyun. It doesn't fix. The window exploded. Glass shattered inward as gunfire erupted, and Nyasha's scream died in her throat as Tae-Hyun's body slammed into hers, taking her to the ground beneath the table. His weight pressed her into the floor, one arm curved protectively around her head, the other reaching for something at his back. More gunshots. Mrs. Lee screaming. Tae-min and Sung returned fire with weapons that seemed to materialize from nowhere. Stay down. Tae-Hyun's voice was hard as iron, all traces of gentleness obliterated. He had a gun now, a sleek black pistol, and he was firing back through the broken window with lethal precision. Nyasha couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel the sharp bite of glass cutting into her arm, the weight of Tae-Hyun body shielding hers, the deafening crack of bullets tearing through the peaceful morning. This was real. This was her life now. Through the chaos, she heard Tae-Hyun bark something in rapid Korean, orders, commands, his voice cold and controlled even as his heart hammered against her back. He fired 3 more shots. Somewhere outside, someone screamed. Then, as suddenly as it started, the gunfire stopped. Tae-Hyun didn't move for a long moment, his breathing harsh in her ear, his body coiled like a spring ready to snap. Then, are you injured? I don't know. He shifted off her carefully, his hands running over her arms, her legs, her stomach, checking for injuries with frantic precision. When his fingers found the cut on her arm where glass had sliced through her dress, his eyes went obsidian with fury. "Nay, Sarang, look at me!" He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Are you hurt anywhere else? The baby?" "I don't know." Her voice came out high and trembling. "I don't know. I can't breathe." His thumb stroked her cheeks, and despite the violence still humming in the air around them, his touch was gentle. "Just breathe. I've got you." But he didn't have her. He'd dragged her into this nightmare, and now people were dying in a cafe that smelled like honey and cinnamon. And Mrs. Lee was sobbing somewhere behind the counter. And Tae-Hyun pulled off his button-down, leaving him in just a white undershirt that showed every line of muscle and ink. He pressed the shirt against the cut on her arm, his jaw clenched so hard she could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. "Taemin," he barked. "Status. 3 shooters on motorcycles, boss. All neutralized. Mrs. Lee is shaken but unharmed. The street is clear for now, but the police will arrive in 5 minutes. Then we have 4. Tae-Hyun turned back to Nyasha, and she'd never seen him look like this, controlled violence wrapped around barely contained terror. "We're leaving now. Mrs. Lee will be compensated and protected. Taemin's already calling it in." He pulled Nyasha to her feet, his arm like iron around her waist. "We need to get you somewhere safe before..." "Before what?" Nyasha's hysteria was building, threatening to break through. "Before your enemies return? Before they realize they missed? Before you go into shock." His voice softened fractionally as he guided her toward the back exit, keeping his body between her and the shattered windows. "Nai Sarang, I need you to hold us together for 5 more minutes. Can you do that for me?" She wanted to say no. I wanted to scream and cry and collapse, but something in his eyes, the desperation, the terror, the absolute certainty that he would incinerate the world to keep her safe, made her nod. "Good girl," he murmured, and kissed her forehead, even as Sung kicked open the back door and scanned the alley beyond. The Mercedes was already running, rear door open. Tae-Hyun practically lifted her into the back seat, sliding in beside her and pulling her against his chest as Taemin peeled away from the curb with precision that suggested he'd done this countless times before. Nyasha's hands were shaking. Her whole body was shaking. She looked down and saw blood. Her blood, soaking through Tae-Hyun's shirt, pressed against her arm, and suddenly, reality crashed over her like a tsunami. Someone had just tried to kill them, kill her, kill their baby. "I can't," her breath came in short gasps. "I can't breathe." "Yes, you can." Tae-Hyun cupped the back of her head, pressing her face into his neck. "Breathe with me. In for 4, out for 4. He demonstrated, his chest rising and falling against hers in a steady rhythm. "That's it. Just like that." She tried to match him, breathing in the scent of his cologne mixed with gunpowder and terror. His other hand rubbed circles on her back, and he murmured soft things in Korean she couldn't understand, but that sounded like comfort, like promises, like prayers. Gradually her breathing slowed. The panic receded enough for her to think again. Who were they? Her voice was muffled against his neck. "I don't know yet." His hand tightened in her hair. "But I will, and when I discovered who gave the order..." He didn't finish, but she felt the violence humming beneath his skin, barely restrained. "You killed them." It wasn't a question. She'd seen the bodies through the window, sprawled on the street, motionless. "Yes." No hesitation, no remorse. Nyasha pulled back to look at him, and what she saw in his face made her chest ache. He looked devastated, jaw clenched, eyes dark with fury and terror, a muscle ticking in his temple. One hand still pressed his shirt against her bleeding arm, while the other cupped her face like she might disappear. "I warned you," he said quietly. "I warned you that having you makes you vulnerable, and you didn't believe me. I believe you now." The words came out broken. Something shifted in his expression. Satisfaction mixed with regret. "I'm taking you somewhere they can't reach you. Somewhere I can keep you protected until I determine who's behind this." "Where?" "Jeju Island. I have a compound there, private, secure, isolated. His thumb traced her cheekbone. No one will touch you there, I promise. A compound on Jeju Island, private and secure, code for isolated and inescapable. That's not a request, is it? No. At least he was honest. You're in danger, Ne Sarang. Real danger. And until I eliminate the threat, you need to be somewhere I can protect you completely. You mean somewhere I can't escape? His jaw clenched. That too. The car sped through Seoul streets, weaving through traffic with illegal precision. Nyasha watched the city blur past, the place she'd fallen in love with, the place that had seemed so magical and full of promise 4 months ago. Now it looked like a war zone waiting to happen. Your arm needs stitches, Tae-Hyun said, examining the cut with clinical focus. We'll stop at the clinic first, then head to Gimpo Airport. I have a jet waiting. Of course he did. Private jets and island fortresses and men who materialized with guns. This was her life now. What about my things? My apartment? Tae-Min will pack everything and bring it to Jeju. You're not returning there. Too exposed. Just like that. Her entire life in Seoul packed up and moved without her consent. Again. But when she opened her mouth to argue, she caught sight of Tae-Hyun, hand still pressed against her wound, his knuckles white with pressure, a smear of her blood across his tattooed forearm. He was holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Like losing her would shatter something fundamental inside him. And despite everything, the manipulation, the lies, the violence, she realized something terrifying. He meant it, all of it. The obsession, the possessiveness, the willingness to kill and die to keep her safe. This wasn't a game to him. It was survival. Tae-Hyun, she whispered, what have you gotten me into? He looked at her then, really looked at her, and his eyes were filled with something raw and desperate. Everything. I've gotten you into everything, and I'm sorry. His forehead dropped to rest against hers. I'm sorry you're hurt. I'm sorry you're terrified. I'm sorry I brought this darkness into your life, but you're not sorry enough to release me. No, his voice cracked. Never that. I'd rather watch you despise me from inside a fortress than attend your funeral because I was too weak to keep you safe. The car pulled up to a modern building in Cheongdam-dong. Sleek glass and steel, no signs, just a discreet entrance. The clinic. Sung opened the door and Tae-Hyun guided her out, his arm wrapped protectively around her waist. As they walked inside, Nyasha caught her reflection in the glass doors. Her yellow sundress was torn and blood-stained. Her hair was wild with glass fragments caught in the curls. Her eyes looked hollow, shocked. She looked like a woman who'd just survived an assassination attempt. She looked like Tae-Hyun Kang's woman. And the most terrifying part, as the doctor stitched her arm and Tae-Hyun held her other hand with a grip that promised he'd never let go, Nyasha realized she wasn't sure she wanted him to anymore. Because out there, beyond these walls, were people who wanted her dead. And in here, holding her hand while her blood dried on his skin, was the monster who'd just proven he'd kill to keep her alive. The cage was closing. The lock was turning. And Nyasha was running out of reasons to fight it. What she didn't know yet, as the private jet carried them toward Jeju Island and the gilded prison waiting there, was that the attack at the cafe? That was just the overture. And the real threat wasn't coming from Tae-Hyun enemies at all. It was coming from the people who'd sent her to Seoul in the first place. The house on Jeju Island wasn't a house. It was a fortress, disguised as paradise. Nyasha stood on the wraparound deck, watching the East China Sea crash against black volcanic rocks below, and tried to remember what freedom felt like. 7 days since the attack, 7 days of white bandages on her arm, Tae-Hyun eyes tracking her every movement, and the suffocating realization that she was completely, utterly trapped. The property was magnificent, she'd concede that. Modern architecture blending seamlessly with Jeju's natural landscape, floor-to-ceiling windows framing ocean views, a private beach accessible only through a guarded gate. Inside, everything screamed luxury. Italian marble, Korean art, a kitchen larger than her entire DC apartment. But luxury didn't change what it was. A cage. Just a beautiful one. "You should be resting." Tae-Hyun's voice came from behind her, and she felt him approach before his arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. His chin rested on her shoulder, and despite everything, her body relaxed into his warmth. That was the problem. Her body kept betraying her brain. "I've been resting for 7 days," she said, her hands settling over his at her stomach, a gesture that was becoming automatic, natural, terrifying in its intimacy. "I'm losing my mind." "The doctor said to take it easy. Stress isn't beneficial for the baby." His lips brushed her temple, then lower, trailing along her jaw in a way that made her breath catch. "Or for you." Nyasha closed her eyes, fighting the way her pulse jumped at his touch. Dr. Choi had come yesterday, a severe woman in her 50s who'd done a full examination and confirmed what Nyasha already knew. 12 weeks pregnant, perfectly healthy, despite the trauma. The baby was fine, she was fine, physically anyway. "I need to do something," she said, turning in his embrace to face him. "I can't just stand here staring at the ocean while you disappear into your office for hours." He looked exhausted. Shadows under his eyes, tension in his jaw that hadn't been there before Seoul. He'd been making calls at all hours, coming to bed smelling like stress and cigarette smoke, pulling her close like she might vanish if he let go. "I'm handling things," he said simply, "making sure what happened at the cafe never happens again. The people who attacked us, they're no longer a problem." His voice was flat, final. "The Hwang family out of Busan made a move on Seoul territory. They targeted you to weaken me." His hands cupped her face, thumbs stroking her cheekbones. "They won't make that mistake again." The casual way he said it, like he was discussing the weather, not whatever violence he'd unleashed, should have terrified her. Maybe it did. But it also made something dark and primitive inside her feel protected. God, what was happening to her? "I want to go for a walk," she said, needing to escape the intensity of his gaze. "On the beach. I need air that doesn't smell like this house." Tae-Hyun's jaw tightened. "Not alone." "Then come with me." She grabbed his hand, lacing their fingers together. "Please. 7 days, Tae-Hyun. I haven't left this property in 7 days. For a moment she thought he'd refuse, but then he nodded, and the relief that flooded through her was embarrassing in its intensity. "All right, but you stay close to me." The private beach was accessed through a stone pathway winding down the cliff face. Tae-Hyun kept his hand on her lower back the entire descent, steadying her over rough patches, his touch both protective and possessive. When they reached the sand, Nyasha slipped off her sandals and let her feet sink into the cool volcanic black grains. The beach was deserted except for 2 guards stationed at the far end, always watching, always present, her shadow wardens. They walked in silence for a while, the waves providing the only soundtrack. Nyasha tried to organize her thoughts, tried to figure out how to ask the question burning in her chest. "Tell me something real," she finally said. "Something that isn't about syndicates or enemies or violence. Something that's just you." Tae-Hyun was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "My mother used to bring me here, before she died." Nyasha stopped walking, turning to look at him. His eyes were fixed on the horizon, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked almost vulnerable. "I was 9, he continued. "She'd rent a small house in Seogwipo every summer, and we'd pretend my father didn't exist, that his debts didn't exist, that the men who came looking for payment didn't exist." His hand found hers again, warm and strong. "She'd make me tangerine juice from the local farms and tell me stories about the haenyeo, the women divers, strong women who could hold their breath for minutes who weren't afraid of the deep." "What happened to her?" Nyasha asked softly, though part of her already knew the answer wouldn't be happy. "My father's debts caught up with us. His voice was flat, emotionless, but his grip on her hand tightened until it almost hurt. She tried to protect me. She failed. And I swore I'd never be powerless like him. Never let anyone I cared about pay for my mistakes. The pieces clicked into place. The obsessive need for control, the willingness to do anything to keep her safe, the fortress mentality. He'd failed to protect his mother, and now he was determined not to fail again, even if it meant becoming the very thing that destroyed people. So, you built an empire, she said. Became the most dangerous man in the room so no one could hurt you again. Yes. He turned to face her fully, his free hand coming up to cup her jaw. And then you walked into that Four Seasons gala wearing scarlet, and you looked at me like I was a man worth saving, like I was more than what I'd become. His thumb traced her bottom lip. And I realized I'd trade every bit of power I've built to keep that look in your eyes. Nyasha's breath caught. The intensity in his gaze made her feel stripped bare, seen in a way that was both terrifying and intoxicating. That's why you did it, she whispered. The pregnancy. You thought if I left, you'd lose the only person who ever saw you as human. I knew I would. His forehead dropped to rest against hers. And I couldn't survive that, Nyasha. I've survived everything else. Poverty, violence, betrayal. But losing you, that would have broken something I can't rebuild. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. She should push him away, should hold on to her anger, her fear, her completely justified rage at what he'd done. But his vulnerability was a weapon she had no defense against. You're asking me to forgive the unforgivable, she said, her voice cracking. No. His lips brushed hers, feather-light, testing. I'm asking you to survive with me. We don't have to call it forgiveness. We can call it adaptation. Despite everything, she almost laughed. Adaptation. That's one word for Stockholm Syndrome. Is it Stockholm Syndrome if you're safer with the captor than without him? His mouth moved to her jaw, pressing soft kisses that made her knees weak. If the world outside is more dangerous than the cage. Nyasha's hands fisted in his shirt, torn between pulling him closer and pushing him away. You're twisting everything. I'm being honest. He pulled back to look at her and his eyes were blazing. I'm a monster. I've done terrible things. But I'm your monster now, and anyone who wants to hurt you has to go through me first. The declaration should have sounded insane. Instead, it sounded like a vow. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. The shift in him was instantaneous, his whole body going rigid, eyes sharpening to that dangerous focus she'd seen right before the cafe attack. What? Her pulse spiked. What is it? He was reading something on his screen, his jaw clenching tighter with each second. We need to get back to the house. Now. Tell me what's happening. Your friend Jasmine. He grabbed her hand and started pulling her back toward the path, his pace urgent but controlled. The one you texted before I took your phone. She just filed a missing persons report with the US Embassy in Seoul. Nyasha's heart stopped. She what? She told them you sent a distress message and then disappeared. His grip on her hand was almost painful as they climbed the stone pathway. The embassy is asking questions. Questions that are going to lead them here, if we're not careful. But that's good, isn't it? Even as she said it, something in his expression made her doubt. The embassy can help me. Tae-Hyun stopped walking abruptly and spun to face her. Help you how, Nyasha? By making you a bargaining chip between governments, by turning you into an international incident. His hands gripped her shoulders. You're carrying the child of Korea's most wanted organized crime leader. Do you really think anyone's priority is your safety? The way he said it, cold, calculated, brutally honest, made ice flood her veins. What are you saying? I'm saying that the moment they confirm your location, you become valuable for all the wrong reasons. To the US government, to the Korean police, to my enemies who will see an opportunity in the chaos. He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. The only person who wants to keep you alive more than they want to use you is me. Nyasha wanted to argue, wanted to believe he was manipulating her, twisting the truth to keep her compliant. But looking into his eyes, seeing the genuine terror there beneath all that controlled violence, she wasn't sure he was wrong. So, what do we do? The question felt like falling. We stay smart. We stay hidden. His thumb stroked her cheek. And we prepare for the possibility that your old life is about to come looking for your new one. As they reached the house, Nyasha glanced back at the ocean, vast and endless and completely indifferent to her crisis. 7 days ago, she'd been shot in a cafe. Now her best friend had potentially put a target on her back by trying to save her. The cage was getting smaller, the exits were disappearing. And the monster holding her hand, he might be the only thing standing between her and something worse. What Nyasha didn't know yet, as Tae-Hyun guided her inside and immediately disappeared into his office to make calls, was that Jasmine's report had done more than alert the embassy. It had triggered protocols, activated assets, set in motion a series of events that would force Nyasha to confront a truth she'd been avoiding since the moment she woke up in Seoul 4 months ago. Nothing about her life had ever been real. Not her job, not her apartment, not even her reason for being in South Korea. She'd been a chess piece from the beginning. And the player moving her across the board was about to reveal themselves. Nyasha waited 4 days before she tried to run. 4 days of watching Tae-Hyun guards rotate shifts, learning their patterns, memorizing the blind spots in the security cameras. 4 days of playing the compliant girlfriend, letting him hold her at night while his breathing evened out into sleep, all while her mind raced with escape routes and desperate plans. Jasmine's missing persons report had changed everything. It meant someone was looking for her. It meant there was still a world outside this gilded cage that remembered she existed. It meant she had to try. The opportunity came on a Friday morning. Tae-Hyun had left for Seoul before dawn, something about meeting with his lieutenants, his voice tight with tension as he'd kissed her forehead and promised to be back by nightfall. Taemin and Sung were with him, leaving only 2 guards on the property, one at the main gate, one patrolling the perimeter. Nyasha had watched them long enough to know the perimeter guard took a cigarette break at the far end of the property every day at 10 a.m., a 15-minute window where the beach path was unmonitored. 15 minutes. That was all she needed. She dressed in dark jeans and a black sweater despite the mild Jeju weather, pulled her hair into a tight bun, and tucked her passport. The one thing Tae-Hyun hadn't confiscated, probably because he didn't think she'd actually try, into her back pocket. Her hands shook as she crept down the stairs, every creak of the floorboards sounding like gunshots in the silent house. The kitchen door that led to the beach path was locked, but she'd memorized the code by watching Tae-Hyun punch it in. 4 digits, 0925. September 25th, the day they met at the Four Seasons Gala. She'd mentioned it once in passing, surprised he remembered the exact date. Now she knows. He'd been marking it like a hunter marks his prey. The lock clicked open. Nyasha's heart hammered as she slipped outside into the cool morning air. The path stretched before her, winding down through volcanic rock and wild grass toward the black sand beach. Beyond that, she could see the main road in the distance, maybe 3 kilometers if she ran. She ran. Her feet pounded against stone, her breath coming in gasps that had nothing to do with exertion and everything to do with terror. Any second now, someone would notice. Any second, alarms would sound and Tae-Hyun men would come for her and... She made it to the beach. The sand slowed her down, but she pushed through, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. So close. She was so close to freedom, so close to... A black SUV was parked at the public beach access point. For a wild moment she thought about flagging it down, begging whoever was inside for help. But something made her hesitate. The way it was positioned. Engine running, windows tinted so dark she couldn't see inside. The passenger door opened. A woman stepped out, mid-40s, blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun, wearing a crisp pantsuit that screamed government officials. She looked at Nyasha with an expression that was equal parts relief and calculation. Nyasha Mitchell? Her English was American, unaccented. My name is Director Hayes. I'm with the US Embassy. Your friend Jasmine reported you missing. Nyasha's knees nearly buckled with relief. Oh my God, oh thank God! She stumbled forward, sand kicking up around her feet. I need help. I need to get out of here before he realizes I'm gone, before Tae-Hyun comes back from Seoul. Hayes's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. We've been monitoring his movements. We know he left this morning. We don't have much time. Something in the woman's tone made Nyasha's relief curdle into unease. How did you know where to find me? How did you know I'd be here right now? We've been conducting surveillance on this property since your friend filed her report. Hayes took a step closer and Nyasha noticed the bulge under her jacket. A gun. We've been waiting for an opportunity. When we saw the reduced guard presence this morning, we knew you might try. The pieces were clicking together in a way that made Nyasha's stomach turn. You've been watching me this whole time. We've been trying to help you, Hayes corrected, pulling out a tablet from the SUV and turning it to face Nyasha. You stopped responding to your supervisor at Meridian Strategic Consulting 3 weeks ago. That triggered protocols. Nyasha's blood ran cold. Meridian Strategic? What are you talking about? Hayes's expression shifted into something harder, more calculating. Come now, Nyasha. You're an intelligent woman. Surely you've started to piece it together. She swiped through files on the screen. Personnel files, background checks, psychological evaluations, all with Nyasha's name on them, all dated months before she'd even seen the job posting. Meridian Strategic Consulting doesn't exist, not as a legitimate company. It's a CIA front operation. The beach tilted sideways. No, that's not. I applied for that job. I interviewed and we selected you from a pool of carefully vetted candidates because you were perfect. Hayes swiped through files on the screen. 28 years old, no family ties after your parents' deaths, no romantic attachments, bachelor's degree in international relations with a minor in East Asian studies. You even had a documented interest in Korean culture from your graduate coursework. Nyasha's hands went numb, her vision tunneled. You're saying I was, what? Recruited? Placed? Placed, Hayes corrected clinically. Your job was to get close to Tae-Hyun, to gather intelligence on his operations, his associates, his vulnerabilities, to become someone he'd trust. She tilted her head, studying Nyasha like a specimen under glass. Though I'll admit, we didn't anticipate you'd be quite this successful, pregnant with his child. That's leverage beyond anything we could have engineered. The words hit like physical blows. Every conversation with her supervisor suddenly made horrifying sense. The casual questions about Tae-Hyun's schedule, the suggestions about which events to attend, which restaurants to visit, which people to introduce him to, the weekly reports she'd filed, thinking they were just standard cultural consulting updates. She'd been feeding them intelligence without even knowing it. She'd been a spy, an unwitting weapon. I didn't know, Nyasha whispered, her voice breaking. I swear to God I didn't know. We know you didn't. That's what made you so effective. Hayes's voice softened fractionally, but her eyes remained calculating. An asset who doesn't know they're an asset can't give themselves away. You were genuine with him. That's why he fell for you. Nyasha's legs gave out. She sank onto the sand, her hands pressing against her stomach, where their baby, the baby he'd deliberately created to trap her, was growing. My entire life was a lie. Your entire life was preparation for this moment. Hayes crouched down to her level. And now we need you to finish what you started. Come with me to the embassy. We'll debrief you, get your testimony about his operations, and put you in witness protection. You and the baby will be safe. Safe? Nyasha laughed, but it came out broken, hysterical. Safe in another cage? Another constructed identity? How is that different from what he's doing? Because we're the good guys, Hayes said simply. And he's a criminal who got you pregnant without your consent to keep you trapped. Was that true? Or was it just another manipulation? Another person trying to control her narrative? Nyasha's mind was spinning, trying to process too much at once. Tae-Hyun had known, from the beginning, what she was. He'd told her that first night in the penthouse. He'd known she was bait and had fallen for her anyway. Or maybe because of it. Or maybe... How much does he know? The question came out hoarse. About me? About Meridian Strategic? Hayes's expression flickered with something that might have been respected. More than we'd like, Tae-Hyun Kang didn't become the head of the Baeko syndicate by being naive. He suspected it from your first meeting. That's why he kept you close, to figure out if you were a genuine threat or an opportunity. An opportunity for what? To corrupt you, to turn you, to make you his instead of ours. Hayes stood, offering her hand. And it worked, didn't it? You're defending him in your head right now, trying to figure out if his cage is better than mine. Nyasha didn't take the offered hand. Couldn't. Her whole body felt like it was made of lead. The difference, Hayes continued, is that we'll let you go eventually. Witness protection isn't forever. But him? He told you himself. He'll never let you leave. That baby inside you was his insurance policy. You know that. Yes, she knew that. Had known it since the moment those 3 lines appeared on the test, but knowing something and accepting it were different things. I need time to think. We don't have time. Hayes's voice sharpened with urgency. His security system has motion sensors on that beach path. Even with reduced guards, someone will have noticed by now. We need to move, Nyasha. Now. As if summoned by her words, Nyasha heard it, the sound of a car engine roaring up the coastal road, moving way too fast. Her heart stopped. No, it was too soon. He wasn't supposed to be back until tonight. Unless the security system had alerted him. Unless he'd turned around the moment she ran. Unless he'd known somehow that she would try. The black Mercedes came into view, skidding to a stop at the edge of the beach access. 3 doors opened simultaneously. Tae-Hyun emerged from the back, Tae-Min and Sung flanking him, all 3 moving with deadly precision. But it was Tae-Hyun's face that made Nyasha's chest crack open. He looked devastated, furious, terrified, his eyes locked on hers across the sand, and the betrayal in them was a living thing. You ran, he said. The words hung in the air like an accusation and a wound all at once. Inuyasha's voice broke. I had to try. I had to try. Tae-Hyun repeated it like the words were foreign, incomprehensible. His hand moved to his back, and when it came forward, he was holding a gun. Had to try to leave me. I had to try to run to them. His gaze shifted to Hayes, and something deadly flickered across his face. Director Hayes, I wondered when you'd make your move. Hayes's hand moved toward her jacket, toward her weapon, but Tae-Hyun was faster. His gun was up and aimed before she could clear leather. I wouldn't, he said softly, his voice cold as winter steel. My men have your driver in their sights. You shoot me, they shoot him. Your backup is 20 minutes away. We all know how this ends if you force my hand. Nyasha stood frozen between them, literally caught between 2 forces that wanted to use her, control her, own her, for different reasons that somehow felt exactly the same. Nyasha, Hayes said without taking her eyes off Tae-Hyun, come here. You're an American citizen. I can protect you from him. She's carrying my child, Tae-Hyun countered, his voice dropping to something possessive and raw. She's mine. And I don't care what government agency you represent, you're not taking her. Yours? Hayes laughed. She's not property, Mr. Kang. She has rights. And we have evidence that you've been holding her against her will, that you deliberately got her pregnant without consent. I never said I didn't consent. The words came out of Nyasha's mouth before she could stop them, before she could even think about what they meant. Both of them turned to stare at her. What? Hayes's professional mask slipped. Nyasha, he admitted to tampering with birth control. That's reproductive coercion. That's illegal in every... I know what it is. Nyasha's hands pressed against her stomach, feeling the slight curve that was barely visible but undeniably there. I know what he did. I know what he is. She turned to face Hayes fully, and something in her chest was cracking wide open. But you made me into a weapon without my knowledge. You constructed my entire life like I was a chess piece on your board. You put me in his path deliberately. We were trying to bring down a dangerous criminal by using me. Nyasha's voice cracked, years of being controlled by people who claimed to know better finally erupting. By turning me into something I never agreed to be. At least Tae-Hyun was honest about what he wanted from me. At least... She stopped. The realization hit her like a freight train. At least when he trapped me, I knew I was trapped. Hayes's expression hardened into something cold and bureaucratic. You're confused. He's manipulated you, isolated you, created a dependency. And what have you done? Nyasha shot back. What's the difference between his cage and yours? Because from where I'm standing, Director, you both want the same thing, to control me for your own purposes. He wants me as his. You want me as your witness. Neither of you is asking what I want. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the waves seemed to quiet, waiting for what came next. Tae-Hyun hadn't moved, his gun still trained on Hayes. But something in his expression had shifted. His eyes were locked on Nyasha with an intensity that made her skin burn. Hope and disbelief and something desperate warring across his features. Last chance, Hayes said, her voice clipped. Come with me now. Testify against him, and we'll put you in witness protection. You and the baby. New identity, new life, safety guaranteed. Safety? Nyasha repeated, and the word tasted like ash. You mean another constructed identity? Another life of looking over my shoulder? Another cage, just with different bars? She took a shaky breath. How long would I have to stay in witness protection? A year. 5. Forever. Hayes's silence was answer enough. Nyasha turned to look at Tae-Hyun, at the monster who'd stolen her choice but was looking at her now like she was his entire world cracking apart. At the man who'd killed to protect her, who'd built a fortress to keep her safe, who'd offered to burn down his empire if it meant keeping her. It wasn't a good choice. It wasn't even a sane choice. But for the first time in 4 months, maybe for the first time in her entire life, it was her choice. I'm staying, she said. The words fell like stones into still water, rippling out in waves she knew she couldn't take back. Hayes's face went cold. You're making a mistake you can't undo, Miss Mitchell. Maybe. Nyasha's voice was steady now, certain in a way that terrified her. But it's my mistake to make, not yours, not the CIA's. Mine. For a long moment, Hayes just stared at her like she was a failed experiment, an asset that had gone rogue. Then she lowered her hand from her jacket and took a step back toward the SUV. This isn't over, Mr. Kang, she said, her eyes hard as flint. We'll be watching. And the moment she wants out, the moment she realizes what you really are and asks for help, we'll be there. She won't, Tae-Hyun said quietly, finally lowering his gun. His eyes never left Nyasha's face. Because unlike you, Director, I'm going to give her something you never did. And what's that? His voice dropped to something raw and honest. A choice to stay. Every single day. Hayes climbed into the SUV without another word. The vehicle pulled away slowly, deliberately, like she was giving Nyasha one last chance to change her mind. When Nyasha didn't move, didn't run after them, the SUV accelerated and disappeared down the coastal road, taking with it Nyasha's last connection to her old life. She stood there on the black sand, shaking, as Tae-Hyun holstered his gun and dismissed Tae-Min and Sung with a sharp jerk of his head. The two men retreated to the Mercedes, giving them privacy but staying close enough to intervene if needed. Tae-Hyun approached slowly, like she was a wild animal that might bolt. He stopped a few feet away, And for the first time since she'd known him, he looked uncertain, vulnerable. "You chose me," he said, and his voice cracked. "Why?" Nyasha looked at him, really looked at him, at the phoenix tattoo disappearing beneath his shirt collar, in the shadows under his eyes from sleepless nights, at the hands that had killed for her, held her, trapped her, protected her. "Because you're right," she whispered. "The world outside is more dangerous than the cage. She was never going to let me go. Not really. Witness protection is just another prison with better PR." She took a step toward him, then another. "And if I have to be trapped somewhere, if I have to belong to someone," her voice dropped, "I'd rather be trapped with someone who's willing to burn the world down to keep me safe than someone who'll use me until I'm no longer convenient." His arms came around her like a vice, pulling her against his chest so hard she could barely breathe. She felt him shaking. This dangerous, deadly man was shaking as he held her like she might disappear if he loosened his grip. "I thought I'd lost you," he murmured against her hair, his accent thicker with emotion. "When the security alert came through, when I saw you running on the cameras, I thought you'd rather risk everything than stay with me." "I did risk everything." She pressed her face into his neck, breathing in his scent, cologne and terror and something desperate. "And I'm still here." He pulled back just enough to cup her face, his thumbs wiping away tears she didn't realize she'd shed. His eyes were blazing with something fierce and possessive and almost worshipful. "I'm going to prove to you that you made the right choice. Every day, ne sarang. I'm going to prove that you're not just surviving with me. You're living." She didn't believe him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But when he kissed her, desperate and claiming and somehow achingly gentle, she realized something that should have terrified her but instead felt like acceptance. She'd chosen her monster. Now she just had to figure out how to live with him. His hands slid into her hair as the kiss deepened, and Nyasha felt herself melting into him despite everything, despite the chaos and betrayal and impossible situation. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. "We need to leave Jeju," he said, his forehead resting against hers. "Hayes knows where we are. She'll come back with more people, more leverage." "Where will we go?" "Thailand. I have property there, completely off-grid, registered under shell companies. Even the CIA can't trace easily." His hands framed her face. "I'll dismantle my operations here, turn evidence over to Korean authorities in exchange for immunity, walk away from everything I've built." Nyasha pulled back to look at him. "You'd really do that? Give up your empire?" "It was never an empire. It was a prison I built around myself after my mother died." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "But you're the first thing that's ever made me want to be free." "What about your enemies? The people who attacked us?" "Taken care of." Something dark flickered in his eyes. "The Huang family won't be a problem anymore. I made sure of that." She didn't ask how, didn't want to know the details of what he'd done to protect them. "And the baby?" Her hand pressed against her stomach. "What kind of life can we give them?" Tae-Hyun hand-covered hers, warm and steady. A quiet one, a safe one, a normal one. He laughed softly. "Or as normal as it can be when your parents are a former organized crime leader and an unwitting CIA asset." Despite everything, Nyasha almost smiled. "That's going to be one hell of an origin story." "We'll tell them the truth." His voice turned serious. "When they're old enough. About how we met, what I did, what happened. They deserve to know their parents aren't perfect. That love is complicated and messy and sometimes starts in the worst possible way. And if they hate us for it, then we'll earn their forgiveness." He kissed her forehead. "The same way I'm going to spend the rest of my life earning yours." Nyasha looked up at him. This dangerous man who'd become her entire world through manipulation and obsession and a twisted kind of love she was only beginning to understand. "I don't forgive you," she said quietly. "Not yet. Maybe not ever." "I know. But I choose you anyway, despite everything. Maybe because of everything." She took a shaky breath. Is that enough? Tae-Hyun's smile was sad and hopeful at the same time. It's more than I deserve, which means it's everything I need. He lifted her into his arms. She gasped and grabbed his shoulders and started carrying her back up the beach path toward the house. What are you doing? Taking you home, he said simply. We have a plane to catch, a life to dismantle, and a future to build. His eyes met hers, and in them she saw the truth of what they were about to do. Ready to disappear with me? Was she ready to leave everything behind? To become someone new? To build a life with a man who'd trapped her but was offering her a kind of freedom she'd never had? Nyasha looked back one last time at the empty road where Hayes' SUV had disappeared, at the life she could have had. Witness protection, safety, a constructed identity that wasn't really hers. Then she looked at Tae-Hyun, at the father of her child, at the monster who loved her enough to change. Yeah, she whispered, winding her arms around his neck. Let's disappear. 7 months later, in a small coastal town in Thailand that didn't appear on any tourist maps, Nyasha watched the sunset paint the Andaman Sea in shades of amber and violet, while Tae-Hyun, now going by David Kim, built a crib in their villa bedroom. Her hand rested on her very pregnant belly, feeling their daughter kick against her palm with what she was sure was her father's stubbornness. She's active today, David said, looking up from the instruction manual with a smile that transformed his face into something soft and human. She knows you're building her escape route, Nyasha teased, and was rewarded with his laugh, that rare, genuine sound she'd been collecting like treasure over the past months. He'd kept his promises, all of them. He dismantled his syndicate, turned evidence against his rivals in exchange for immunity, and walked away from everything he'd built. They disappeared into new identities so thoroughly that even Hayes' resources couldn't find them. Every morning he asked if she wanted to stay. Every morning she said yes. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even fully healed. But it was real. And it was theirs. And it was built on choices she made freely. Now. Do you regret it? She asked, watching him work. Giving up everything? David looked at her with those midnight eyes that had once terrified her and now felt like home. I regret how we started. I'll spend the rest of my life earning back what I took from you. He placed his hand over hers on her belly, feeling their daughter move. But regret you? Regret this? Never. As the sun dipped below the horizon and their daughter kicked again, Nyasha realized that sometimes love doesn't save you from the darkness. Sometimes you both have to walk through fire to find something worth keeping. And sometimes the monster teaches you how to be free. Their story wasn't a fairy tale. It was messy and complicated, and built on ashes and forced choices. But as David pulled her close and their daughter kicked between them, Nyasha thought maybe that was okay. Maybe perfect love stories were overrated anyway. Maybe real love, the kind that survived everything and chose to stay, was better. If you stayed till the very end, thank you for walking through the fire with Nyasha and Tae-Hyun. Their journey wasn't clean or comfortable. It was raw, chaotic, and heavy, and that's exactly why it felt real. If you're ready for Afro-Korean stories that refuse to soften the truth, hit subscribe and stay close. Drop your loyalty in the comments too. Are you a Team Monster or Team Freedom? Either way, this isn't the end. I'll meet you in the next story.